Okay, I think we're live, which is fantastic. And a very warm welcome to our Customer Success Leadership Conversations webinar series, special double guest edition today. Guest one, Christy Falterosso, Chief Customer Officer at Client Success. And I have got a little bit of a thing I've written about her. A New York-based whirlwind of energy and enthusiasm for all things customer success. Christy is a multi-award winning CS leader and innovator whose previous role was VP for customer success at IntelliShift and currently manages all of Client Success's end-to-end customer experiences. Christy has a laser-like focus on customer growth through a combination of grow, retain, and expand sales motions. Welcome, Christy.
Thanks, Rick.
Guest two, Remco de Vries. We really are just so lucky, aren't we? Two fantastic guests. Remco de Vries, VP of Revenue Marketing for Gainsight. Based in the beautiful city of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Remco was VP of Marketing at Insided, a specialist customer community of software platform that was purchased by Gainsight in January 2022. Remco was a key player for Insided, and since the buyout, he's already proved his value to Gainsight, moving in just 2 years from the initial role of VP of Marketing Community to VP of Global Demand to end up in his current role as VP of Revenue Marketing Global. So welcome to you as well, Remco.
Thank you. Super excited to be here. I also love these intros, by the way.
I know. I was like, it's better than mine. Rick, send me a copy of it when you're done.
I'm just having fun with them. I'm just having fun with them. So I enjoyed like writing a little bit. And for myself, of course, I imagine that the vast majority, at least, of people know. My name is Rick Adams. I'm the CEO and founder of Practical CSM. We focus on customer success training and certification and coaching. My background is initially technical, but moving into technology consulting and coaching. I freelanced with a lot of different organizations, including organizations such as Cisco, helped develop their customer success specialization, and work alongside many other organizations now to sort of deliver and enhance the training that they deliver to their customers. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, and I've got a book out, Practical Customer Success Management, as well, if you're interested in getting that book from all good bookshops and, of course, Amazon. So, great to have you both here. And I think particularly because this particular topic is something that I perhaps don't have as much experience in specifically as the two of you do. So I think it's great to have the two of you here today. Our topic is customer success and customer communities. And I think before we go any further, what I want to do is I just want to put up a little bit of a poll. Let me share my screen. So for those who are attending, a welcome to you as well. Great to have you with us. Please do feel free to contribute with your questions, your thoughts, your observations. Use the chat window to do so. Don't wait to ask, just go right ahead and chat in the chat window. We're interested to know your experiences in this topic as well. Starting with this very simple poll, how far advanced is your company's customer community strategy? From 0, we don't have a strategy, through to 5, measuring and refining, and knowing the value you're getting from your mature customer community strategy. So from 0 to 5, where are you currently? Please put a number in there and tell us where you are as well, what you're up to. Anything you want to tell us will be great. And whilst you're doing that, let me just give a little bit of an intro to this topic, and then we'll look at what the responses have been like. So let me just get to my page of information that I have written here. Oops, too many screens open. Okay. I found an article in Harvard Business Review called Getting the Most from an Online Customer Community, believe it or not, from 2016. Okay, so this is way back. But it said this, and I thought this was just a really good way of just starting us off. Over the years, online community research has matured from novelty to necessity, but simply having access to customers in communities is no longer enough. Not when all your competitors have similar platforms. The differentiator is how you use those platforms to make your customers a strategic asset. What you do with the insights and how you draw inspiration from the community to align priorities, create meaningful change, and ultimately generate new value. I thought that was a really nice sort of way of introducing the topic. I think it's safe to say that when customer success management was first became popular, our focus was more on like a one-to-one interaction with the customer at a time, probably only our premium customers even then, helping to help that customer generate maximum value. But we soon realized, didn't we, that we could only go so far down that route, and that expanding into a one-to-many type relationship that we can have with our clients, and even backing out of it and having them form relationships with themselves, is equally powerful, perhaps in some cases even more powerful. Because there's one thing if I say my product's great, or it could be used in this way, but how much more powerful is it if somebody else who's got no particular reason to say that is saying that my product is great and that they have used it to generate X, Y, and Z. So there's all sorts of fantastic reasons, and those are just amongst them, I think, but for communities to be such of importance, and for many reasons. So the concept has risen, it's a key requirement, and hence we've obviously selected for our discussion today. So let's take a look and see what people have said. So let's go to the chat window and let's do a quick summing up here. What do we think we've got? Oh, wow, what a wide range. 111041005. My goodness, Brandy, I'm impressed. 001003540 225 again, Sarah. Wow. 1 3. Okay, so the whole gamut, we've got all of them there. Safe to say there's quite a lot of zeros, so great, and welcome to you. You're in the right place, because this is a fantastic opportunity to learn about what to do, and also quite a lot of ones. So either got no strategy, or we've started discussing it. Actually, is probably the most popular. Not many threes, but quite a few then moving into 4, and 1 or 2 in 5 as well, which is great to see. So we've got a range. For those who've got some experience, who've put in their 3s, 4s, and 5s, please do. I mean, in fact, anyone, please do contribute in the chat window. If you've got ideas, then share them. Don't wait for myself, Christy, and Remco to come up with them. We may not. You might have got some experience that we don't have, and we'd love to learn that. So please do contribute with your questions, but also feel free to respond as well. And it's also great to see people from Europe, from the Indian subcontinent, from the UK, from Americas, everywhere. So that's great as well. All right, good. So let's crack on in. Please do keep coming up with your with the information, and I'm going to stop sharing. Let's get back to our screen here and let's get on. So how are we going to do this? We got about 50 minutes left of our hour. So what I decided to do is to divide the time up into 3 core questions. And obviously we're going to then respond to those questions one at a time. So the first one is, what can or should customer communities do for my customers and for my own company? Then we're going to look at what practical considerations should I be aware of when developing, implementing, and managing a customer community initiative? And then we're going to finish off by looking at how will customer communities, did I say customer? I can't say it now. Customer communities develop and evolve over the next 1 to 2 years. So that's what we're going to do. I did provide those ahead of time to my illustrious guests. So let's take a look and see what they have to say. And Christy, I wonder if you'd mind kicking us off with that first question. I'll read it out again. What can customer communities do for my customers and for my own company? And if you could just kick us off with your initial thoughts, and then Remco, you and I can join in, as and when.
Awesome. Happy to get us started. So I want to give the audience a little context, right? Because I don't have Remco's background. I didn't come from a community platform. I haven't seen all the things he's seen. But the context for me is I just recently deployed our customer community earlier this year. So we partnered with a platform vendor who is hosting our community. And we've gone through the entire process of designing and planning and building the strategy, deploying it, launching, failing miserably, reinvigorating it. So we've learned a ton. So that's the context, and think the value that I'll be able to provide in the context here. So that said, sorry
to interrupt straight away, but can I just say, and that's kind of the value that the two of you bring, because you have got 2 very different perspectives.
Yeah.
That more rounded view. But please do carry on.
Absolutely, which I think is going to bring a lot of interesting insight to this conversation. So job well done, Rick, in picking your co-host today. Okay, so what can or should customer communities do for my customers or my own company? So I there was like 4 or 5 things that I think were really top of mind for me, and I'm sure Remco is going to add to that. But the first thing that came up was facilitating relationships. I don't know how many of you speak with customers who are often seeking that you connect them with other customers who look like them, who are solving the same problems, that are looking to build relationships with their peers and their colleagues. Well, that is something big that comes from our customers all the time, which is interesting because I provide customer success software for customer success teams, and I think it's the most vibrant community out there. But not everyone is using LinkedIn and all of the other communities that are available. So a lot of our customers will come to us and say, we want to feel connected to our peers and our colleagues who are using your software, but also solving similar problems. So for me, the first one was all about facilitating relationships and kind of anchoring on one of our core values at Client Success, which is building relationships that last. So for us, I think there was immense value in just helping our customers find other people who were doing similar things, either in our platform or just in their practice. The second big thing for us was education enablement at scale. This was a tremendous value, right? We do so much to help educate our customers one-on-one with our regular recurring engagement, but oftentimes we're isolated to just the individuals who are participating in those calls and hoping that that information disseminates itself in the organization, which I will tell you, most of the time it's like a game of telephone, right? What you said is not ultimately will make it to the end recipient. So we want to be able to have more control around educating and enabling our customers and making sure that we're tailoring it around personas and use cases and not just assuming that everyone is trying to do the same things in our software. So we loved the community aspect to help bring our customers together to educate them, but then allow them to educate one another, right? We think that while we have great insight into best practices and things they could or should be doing, we find that the community is like a breathing ground for insights and learnings and things you just can't find anywhere else. So there has been immense value in just allowing not only us to educate and enable our communities, our customers, but having them educate each other on best practices. And I'll tell you, your customers are probably doing crazy things with your software that you have no idea about, and you want other customers to learn from that because there's probably a tremendous value. The next thing is engaging with our brand. The big thing that I really love about communities is it avoids isolated relationships and single-threaded relationships. With the community, not only does it give my customers access to all of the best at our organization, like all the different people, right, from our CEO down to some of our developers, but it also is allowing us access to different folks in the partnership for our customers that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. So like I said, most of the time when we're engaging with our customers, we're speaking with admins and leaders, right? Very specific personas in the relationship who are a core part of the partnership. But oftentimes those aren't the end users, right? And so if the end users of my software are CSMs, I don't often get to talk to them, but our community allows me to have access to them. So when we want to say, as leaders, we always say, get high and get wide and avoid single-threaded relationships. That's like a key tenet, I think, in all of our strategy. Well, this enables you to actually do that. I will tell you, I have met so many different people in our customer base because of the community. And that's given us a lot of access to hearing and learning, which brings me to my next point. Community has been awesome for identifying advocates and detractors, right? So you get to hear all of the good and all the not so good. And a lot of folks I hear are often worried about that, right? Like, what if your customers go into your community and they're like, poo, 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 this is horrible, things broken, it sucks, service is horrible. You cannot be afraid of those voices. In fact, that is your opportunity to lean into them. And one of the things I've loved about our community is that I've identified our biggest champions, folks I didn't even know loved us, and then also customers who I thought maybe were super happy, who are completely frustrated and not getting the value that I thought. And I'm not ashamed to say that, like, yes, those customers are in our base, and I'm sure we all have happy and unhappy customers. But being able to hear their frustrations or hear things that they love allows us as an organization to lean into that. Product is active in our community, customer success is active there, marketing is active there, sales is active there. So making sure that all parts of your business are hearing and learning from your customers, I think makes everyone better, which is the last point, and then I'll pass it over to everybody else, is just the ability to build and design an organization that is truly customer-centric, right? We hear and learn so much from our customers via the channel that is community, and that enables us to design our product roadmap, fix and change processes that are not working or effective, mitigate risk early on, right? So from a business standpoint, there's a lot of upside to what we can do as an organization based off of what we're seeing, hearing, and communicating in the community platform.
Wow, so interesting. And my immediate thinking here is that with all that you have described in terms of the value for your customers and the value that you get back as an organization from this as well, and particularly that last point, which is extremely strategic, visionary, and talking about very much the relationship between the customer and client success, the organization, and how you want the customer to drive your direction and your ambitions and your goals, is that this is not a bolt-on. And even though it may be coming later in client success's maturity as an organization, it sounds to me like you can't do it as a side thing.
No, very much not.
Very strategically well thought through. So with that in mind, Remco, do you want to sort of respond to some of the great points that Christy's been making, please?
Yeah, so I would definitely echo, I think all of them. I also think the last one is probably the most important one, because it's also sort of a qualifier, I think, when I look at community programs and also all of the companies that we've helped in the past to try and build them and also keep them. It was also certainly mostly the downfall for a lot of those communities where you actually weren't as bought in as a business as you should be into the program. Community is always described as a lift, and it kind of is. So it definitely takes a bit of work, sometimes a little bit of resources, money. You definitely need to think about it, make sure everyone's engaged and everyone also stays engaged from a business perspective to also get that back from your customers in the end. So I think one of the most important things, I think I'm not going to echo all of the things Christy said, so I'll maybe add two. So one of the things that I think is the core strength of community is us, right? Us as humans. Not as professionals or accounts or upsell potential or opportunities that you're managing, but just the basic human person. And I think for us, making these connections or having these relationships or seeking other people out to help with problems that we might be perceiving is one of the most natural things that we can do. And this is what I love about communities, especially in business, because I always tell our customers that I think having a community of customers and trying to basically strengthen those relationships is not really that much different from having a football team. I can say football now because we're also talking to somewhat of an EMEA audience, I think. So I'm going to skip the whole soccer and just say football. I think when you're in your football team, you have this sense of belonging. You're the striker of this team. You have been for 10 years. You feel at home there, you know all the guys very well. Yeah, you're welcome, Lilia. You know all the guys very well. So you really feel like this is your place, this is your spot. And I think that's also what businesses should strive to try and build out for their customers, that at least what they'll get there is a very honest relationship between them and your company. And it's a relationship that's a two-way street, right? It's a feedback thing, not necessarily just a company sending information over to you. And the other thing is that you can influence what's going on. You can actually get value from it, but you're also able to deliver value to the rest of the community. And that we try and also help a little bit in making those connections from a business perspective. I think that's probably the most important thing. And then from a company perspective, maybe to just add one more thing, I think community is often only talked about from a relationship perspective and a self-service perspective. So users helping users and peer-to-peer support. It all sounds beautiful, and it also is. So we also have a lot of customers that no longer have any ticket volume because everything's handled by their users, which I think is beautiful. But I also think communities, because it's such a hard program, and also because you need resources to get it off off the ground, it needs to in some way or form also adhere to business objectives and let's say your company's bottom line, or at least in some way, I don't know, your cost to serve, or it needs to have some monetary value for your CFO to look at the program and then think that it's a sound investment, instead of raising their eyebrow and looking at this and questioning whether or not we should see this as a potential to save some money, right? So I also feel like, especially in the last year, communities have started to evolve to also largely be more connected to no longer lofty business goals, but also just larger business goals in terms of like actual company outcomes and your company's bottom line. And I think we should now also start counting that too as one of the most important things that a community can bring to a business, because the program cannot exist without it.
Thank you very much. So really interesting points there as well. I liked what Dustin has said, Dustin Harbison, is it? In the chat window. Through our account management program, we connect our customers to each other to solve problems. This fosters our relationships and helps to drive our customers to become product advocates. I think you were actually sort of saying something similar there a moment ago, Remco, and I'm sure, Christy, also you touched on this point as well in what you were talking about.
Especially in customer success, I feel this is the thing. It's almost like a therapy.
Well, right. I mean, why just do your own customer success when your customers can do your customer success, help you do it and maybe do it better because they're on the ground really doing it. And I think that point, Christy, that you made earlier about, goodness knows what your customers are up to with your product. Once it's out in the world, people find other stuff for it, and maybe don't use half the features for the purpose you had them in mind at all, and are doing something completely different with it, but equally valuable or more valuable. And so we want to share that juice, right? But I think also I like this particular point that Dustin used on solving problems, because problem solving, I think it comes from not just a technical knowledge of the product a lot of the time, but actually expertise, which involves experience, which means you've been there and done that. And I think sometimes customer A, who maybe is more mature, is exactly the right people to help customer B better place than we are, because they've actually done it and can do a little bit more hand holding. Any thoughts on any of
that? Chris, you want to go first?
Sure. I was gonna say it's a valid point. I think one of the things that we've really benefited from, and I don't know if Remco, if you're seeing the same thing, is being able to control is not the right word. So in lack of finding a better word to control, I'm going to use control. But by having our own community, it actually allowed us more visibility into what our customers were saying, what they're doing, how they're engaging.
Right.
When we didn't have that, right? We knew our customers were still engaging other places, but we didn't have that visibility, right? Whether they were in a gain, grow, retain as like GGRs, another community, or other. I mean, listen, there's so many customer communities out there, customer success communities. So our customers could have been anywhere. When we started our own, though, being able to have that visibility and being able to control that and lean in strategically, and sometimes I wouldn't call it proactively because it's after the fact they've already raised it, but quicker than we would have otherwise been able to. That was a real benefit to us having our own community. And so, from a product standpoint, there was a lot of upside there, but from a strategy and from a partnership standpoint as well.
So that's visibility and actually the data as well, which you can then
we own that, right?
And,
so all of the things that are happening and being said, good, bad, or otherwise, again, within our control to leverage it strategically to drive the business. And that was a big thing, right? Like, are the things that we're doing having impact? We'd often hear about that in the community. Are the things we're doing working from a product standpoint, from a strategy standpoint? I just think that when you have that level of visibility to act on it and drive your business from it, you're in a better position.
And so that is, and I will come to Remco, but that's driven so actual business insight for your company. Yeah.
I mean, I would say like that's our field marketing. That's where at least where it originates, is being able to use that to determine things like, oftentimes we have product stuff that's happening in their conversations and whatnot. It often validates our roadmap, our vision, our direction. It helps us realize things that should be included that may not have been part of that. From a product standpoint, from a services standpoint, things that we're doing well, things that are not going well, right? What I think community, the real benefit to us is it allows us to avoid assumptions. And I always say assumptions are like the worst thing that can happen in a business is when you assume you know something. I'll tell you as a CS leader, I don't make any changes that don't involve validating it with my customers. Now, I'm not saying this is like designed by committee, but I definitely make sure that voices are heard and considered, because otherwise I'm a fool.
You're so right. And I've fallen into that trap yeah,
We
more
all
than
have. We all
yeah,
have, right? I just
yeah,
know better
yeah,
now.
yeah,
Our
absolutely.
experiences have taught
Yeah,
us to
exactly.
never make
No,
assumptions.
go out and do the research and actually find out empirically, yeah, from the people who for whom it really matters, i.e. your clients. Remco.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. I think this is also a nice complementary thing to the whole movement around customer advisory boards and those kinds of things, but just at scale, right? Usually you have a little bit of a different discussion there. I think it's also quite cool to see, to be honest, because there's so many creative things that come from your customers that you would normally never, ever have thought of. And what I think is even better is that then customers start discussing amongst each other whether or not for example, a lot of our customers use their community to also be a scalable process for feature requests and those kinds of things. Yep. We'll actually get other customers then to debate them whether or not it's actually a solid feature request that will bring the product anything or their company any value. Or, for example, customers that will tell someone that requested a feature that it actually already exists and they can do it in so and so way, right? So I think it has extreme amounts of business potential, but I think it also has extreme amounts of community potential in the sense that your community, is basically developing itself also in a way, and your solution is following suit, which I think is super strong.
And going back to the point that you made earlier, which I really liked, which I think Ernie here is mentioning again in the chat. So again, let me just read out what Ernie has just written. As Christy said, the level of visibility a community provides is priceless. The community also forces transparency to clients in the org. Everything is on the table, good, bad, and not so good. And coming to your point, Christy, about how there could be hesitancy maybe at senior level about what if we're allowing customers a voice. It's one thing for us to hear the voice, but do we really want other customers to hear the grumpy voice?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it's like, I think everyone in the beginning, it is terrifying. I don't know anybody who launches a community who doesn't have that fear. I've heard it from literally everybody I talk to. It's like the number one top of the list reasons why we don't want to launch a community. But I will say, lean into it. You'll also find, honestly, that your advocates will also defend you or stand up for you or help guide those conversations. I've seen this a couple times where customers frustrated by product things that it didn't do this or doesn't have that, they'll lean in and be like, no, it doesn't. But have you tried doing it this way? Workarounds are like my favorite. And our advocates will often be like, yeah, actually, I talked to their product team and it's on their roadmap. Or, hey, in the meantime, we're doing it X, Y, and Z. Or, I'm sorry that's your experience. We're actually having a very different experience. So it allows people to have real conversations, but for us to address it publicly too, right? Like, I never stray away from a tough comment or post or thread. I lean into it, right? I want to listen. I want to learn. It's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between like tough because it's true that something didn't work when it should have done, and just like rude or ignorant.
Well, this is why I think
there's a definite demarcation where that's fine. You can still do what's the word where you're sort of managing the content and getting rid of some of it that you don't want. Yeah, you
still like police it. I don't know if that's the right word.
There's still a little bit of a role for policing in that, purely in the sense of keeping things on topic and professional.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's why communities have to have guidelines, right? And Remco, I'm sure that's a best practice for you guys. But like when we were building our community, we were instructed, right? Make sure you have clear guidelines that are there that help people understand what is tolerated and what is not. And so I spent a lot of time crafting that, got probably more detailed than I needed to be, but I wanted to be explicitly clear on what also would happen for folks that were violating those guidelines, because I would never let anybody who's active in the community feel uncomfortable, feel threatened, right? Like you don't want that. So if anyone's rude or disrespectful, you have to nip that in the bud right away.
I also think that, and there's potentially a difference in B2B and B2C here, but I think I hardly ever see this type of behavior, especially in B2B communities, especially also in the customer success community in general. I think the perks of having your users on there and being their own human self is also that if they're being a beep, then basically everyone will see them as who they are. And that basically is providing them at least with a sense of I'm not going to do that, which is good. And in general, I think also that there is little policing for companies to do with communities, because the community will do it themselves. They're also there for a reason. They're there to get some kind of value or take some kind of pride of being a very valuable member of a certain community, or potentially even an expert in a certain area, or these kinds of things. So they're not going to let that area turn into something that basically will endanger that. So I don't necessarily always, or at least see that as a risk, especially in B2B. I hardly see it happen ever. And it's the same thing also with, I personally don't see potentially negative comments as a risk at all. I think it's an opportunity for you to show what kind of company you are. Communities are part of your, I would say, or one of your most important tools to actually strengthen your customers' experience with you and your company, but also just the experience in general. I think showing, or you as a company showing that you're doing everything that you can to solve something for someone that's very unhappy goes a much longer way than just someone being unhappy. We're all unhappy often, or sad about something that happens at work or whatever. And I think we're also all very capable of assigning the appropriate value to that moment in time, which I think is going to, it's not a thing at all. I think the thing that I hear most from a B2B SaaS perspective is, what if my competitor joins my community? Mm-hmm. I think that's the main concern that I usually hear with SaaS companies. Because if I want to have them, for example, think about new ways to leverage my product, what if my competitor is in that conversation as well and they steal our ideas? That's the thing that I hear most, which I think, by the way, is a ridiculous thing, but that's the main concern that I mostly hear from SaaS companies thinking about starting a community.
Okay. Well, I think this is where it comes into play, where you got to figure out what your strategy is, right? Is your community going to be a gated community that is just for your customers? Or are you trying to have a public community that is also helping with lead gen and prospects as well? So I think that's, can impact your strategy and also combat that risk. For example, at Client Success, we didn't build our community for the public, not because we were worried about our competitors or anything like that. It was more so the fact that there are a billion customer success communities out there, and we don't need to compete with all of them, right? People don't need another place to go, but our customers, on the other hand, they want a place where they're there to talk about our platform, their use cases, their things, and want to feel part of something that's a little bit more exclusive, right? Like that they all have something in common. So for us in the space that we play, it didn't make sense to create an open community. But so I think that's the difference there, is also determining part of your strategy. Are you going to have an open community for everybody, or is it a private one that is just for your customers?
In other words, invitation only. So
correct.
Yeah. Although, of course, there's nothing to stop, in principle, your competitor from becoming a customer using an assumed name and so on and so forth. But if you're that paranoid, so be it. And
yeah, that's extreme. Ours is SSO though, so you can't, if you don't have access to our platform, you can't actually get into our community. So there's ways, I think there's ways to control that.
Usually single sign-on.
Yeah.
No,
well,
exactly.
absolutely. And I think that is the difference really between a customer community, which is really what we're discussing, isn't it, today, and a public community. Yeah, obviously it's using the same technology, but perhaps fulfilling a slightly different role. And I also think, to an extent, I kind of welcome debate and discussion with competitors as well. I think we can all learn from each other, and actually we can grow together. And I think it's far better to be a friendly partner competitor than to be an unfriendly, grumpy competitor, personally. So again, two ways of looking at your competitors. They could actually be very valuable to you at times as well.
Yeah, we also
maybe great partnership opportunities.
Yeah, we also used to do events with our community competitors, or sometimes CS competitors. Right. Like in general, you're growing the market together. So maybe look at it from that perspective. It's much healthier.
Okay. So look, is there anything else either of you would like to say specifically about value? Or shall we turn to the practical considerations side of things?
I mean, I can speak to value and morph into the practical implication side of things.
Right. Well, let me put the question, and then you can take it away, Remco, and go in whatever direction you feel you'd like to do. So the second question then is, and by the way, sorry, I did say, I know we've missed a couple of points that were made on the chat. I deliberately haven't read those out because I think they will fit better in this section than they would have done in the previous one. So if you have made a comment and you're thinking, why has it not been responded to, it might just get responded to in just a moment. So what we've been talking about is what can or should customer communities do for my customers and for my own company. What we're going to talk about now is what practical considerations should I be aware of when developing, implementing, and managing a customer community initiative. Over to you, Remco.
Yeah. So maybe just to start at the value point that we ended off with. So I think community is something that you can apply to a lot of use cases. There's a lot of things that you can try and attempt to solve through community, or at least a lot of metrics and use cases that you can try to influence. I think this is also why there's always such a lively debate about who should own the community program, for example. Can either be support or CS or marketing or product. Like, we have all different shapes and sizes, and they're probably also all equal in terms of at least if I look at my customer base and the penetration of who owns community there. So what I always think is interesting about value is, because there are so many use cases, what you want to do is then say, okay, so we can do this and we can do this and we can solve this use case, and then potentially we can do this with marketing, and then we'll also set up this feedback flow for product, and then the program is buzzing, it's beautiful, it's big, it's massive. But I think that's also quite a challenge, and often also more so a practical limitation, or at least something that you should think of when you're practically going to build a program like this. So what I think usually is the best approach to value is to choose one use case and go solve it first, and then go next. I think also when you're talking about practical applications, the death of most communities is expectations. So as I just mentioned, because there's so much that you can do, what usually will happen is that the exec team gets promised that all of those cases will be solved in 6 months, and you'll have 50% penetration of your customer base active on your community. And besides those 50% and how many users they might represent, there's also 1,000 or 2,000 users that have just magically showed up because they are interested in your space and in your vision on your space, and they will join as well. And that never happens. There isn't a community, including Salesforce and everyone else, that grew to 100,000 members in a year. And neither will our community, your community, and all future communities that get started. So I think the most important thing to practically think of is, okay, so how am I going to build this thing, and how am I going to do it as slow as possible so that I can make sure that every step I take is well thought through, has actually included the people that I want to participate in my community. So please also include your customers. This sounds like a no-brainer, but is often forgotten. You can include them at every stage, when it's building out the strategy, to selecting the platform, to making sure that they're creating content for you, to doing whatever. And then you start with 20, and the 20, they get to a point where they think the platform is valuable to them. You invite 20 more, and the other 20 will help you, but you make sure that the next 20 are also successful. And then you maybe ramp up to 50 and 100. And maybe in a year you have 700 customers in your community, but they're all extremely happy. They're very engaged. They're helping you broaden and expand the program. And they're basically getting value out of it, which is making them wake up the next day and log in again. And I think that's the most important practical implementation for community, because it's also a program that can die very easily if you haven't thought it out, and if you've basically just kickstarted it too quickly and have too high expectations.
So better to do a few things well than lots of things not so great that doesn't really attract people back to use any of them. Is that kind of the message?
Yeah, I've been in a few cases actually where I thought a really cool SaaS company with a great vision on what they were doing. They basically set up the whole thing, and then they opened the floodgates and it didn't happen. And I think that's always such a shame, because these companies actually do have a voice, and their customers are probably also very engaged with that voice. They just really haven't thought through how they should bring it and how they should bring their customers into it, which I think is such a shame.
So as with many things, as with business, indeed, these days, when you're developing a business, take an iterative approach, do a little bit, let it out, see what happens to it, learn from your experience and then decide based on that what the next little bit is. Yeah.
Yep.
And just go through this like iterative approach, you're
Yep.
saying. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add on this topic before we again sort of throw it open? So again, we're saying practical considerations to be aware of when developing, implementing, and managing a customer community initiative. Or if not, we can throw it open to Christy whilst you're thinking about that, and maybe Christy, if you want to pick up on that.
Okay, well, I failed miserably at launching my community, so I have lots of practical learning to share with the group. All right, first thing, your community is not going to survive or thrive on its own. One of the things that I underestimated significantly is the lack of the amount of ownership that community actually needed to survive and thrive, not only for our business, but for the community itself. I built and deployed our community all by my little self every night, all weekends until I got it up and running. And I was like, no, I can do this. And I did it. And it was great. Wrote everything myself, designed it all in Canva. Looks beautiful. And I did this big launch program and rolled it out and all the bells and whistles. And I'm like, great. Now our customers are just going to like make this thing happen and it's going to be magical. And guess what didn't happen? They didn't just come and it wasn't magical. So we did have a couple customers who were very excited and got in there right away and were very active. And that was like the 1%ers. So like they were in doing their thing, but I didn't have anybody who was paying attention to it. My team here at Client Success is small. In fact, I end up doing most of our big projects and initiatives on my own, and I don't have resources. I don't have budget to hire resources. So a lot of it is like on me to figure it out. And I'm okay with that. But with community, I underestimated the amount of ownership that it would need and oversight. So if you are going to launch it and you're thinking about it, you don't maybe need a full-time person day one, but you do need somebody who is going to be able to allocate enough time to it and is going to be accountable for its success. The second thing, be able to measure the right metrics. Avoid vanity metrics like number of members. That is not a business metric. So when you're getting ready to like launch your community, be very methodical about what are the outcomes that we're trying to drive and what are the metrics that will tell me, leading and lagging indicators will tell me that this program is a success. So like Remco talked about, if you've got different teams involved, right? Like for each of those, what are the different objectives and what are the metrics that you can really measure and pay attention to? Remember, you can't manage what you can't measure. Have a strategy and a plan. For us, we had a strategy, had operative word. And then like after launch, I didn't have a strategy. I had a strategy for building, I had a strategy for launching, and I had a vision for what it would be, but I didn't have a plan of what we would do. And again, that ownership really was lacking. So it's not enough to play it by ear. You really do have to be intentional about what you're leveraging your community for and how you're going to achieve those objectives. And then lastly, I'll give you collect feedback early and often. Obviously, your customers are going to be vocal about all things in your community, but you want feedback about the community. So don't assume that you know what your members want and what's valuable to them. Even if you see them using it, you can't assume that they're getting value from it, right? So one of the things that we started to do is actually just create like this little micro board of like our community advisors. And they were the ones that were giving us feedback, things that they were saying that they thought were working really well, things that we could be doing better to help them. We also even appointed like a little group of delegates, and then they took on some ownership of the community themselves, right? So it was a way for me to alleviate some of my ownership, but empower them to own their own community. Like, this is for you. You guys lead it. And so doing things like that really helped, but collecting the feedback early and often is something I wish I would have done sooner. I'm doing it now. We're putting a lot of eggs in our community basket as we prepare for 2024. But those were some of my early failures and learnings.
I think that was also a great learning from GGR when it actually got started by Jay and Jeff back then. I think the first customers that actually, or customers, the first people that actually, because we weren't even customers, that joined GGR and actually started actively contributing, they gave them things like founder ranks, for example. Yep. So they made the founder of the community.
Gamification.
Exactly. Yeah. So sort of solidify their buy-in to the platform and to the movement that they were trying to set up. And GGR is still going to this day and is actually very reliant on a lot of these people still to make sure that there's new content, fresh perspectives, or just responses, engagement, those kinds of things. I think these things are really smart and go a long way.
let's carry this point a little further, if we may, and just sticking with this concept of like a really basic question about like when is the right time. Okay, at what stage in an organization's growth, maturity, however you want to look at it, when do we think it's the right moment for a company to say, now is the moment for us to create a customer community?
Yeah, so I think a community program always doesn't matter if you have 10 customers or
Okay.
200. The shapes and sizes.
Brand new startup. We're starting this week. We've just launched. Do you think that would go
immediately? Yeah. So
okay.
Platform you can debate. So the shape and size of it you can debate. I would probably also invest in a larger platform a little bit later, as soon as you potentially already have a bit of a better approach to just your program in general, but also what you're going to bring, what your vision on the whole program is going to be, what your voice as a company within that community is going to be, and what you're going to be expecting from your customers, or what they will be expecting from you. I think that comes a little bit later, but I think the very basic things of asking feedback of your customers, engaging with them, making sure that your customers are engaging with other customers that have dealt with similar problems, or are at least trying to deal with similar problems, like these sort of basic, I would say, traits of a community program, you should start immediately with your first 10 customers.
I mean, asking feedback of a customer does not require a customer community, right? I mean,
no, but
there's community as a strategy and there's community as a platform, and those two things are different, right? I think we're talking a lot today about like launching maybe a customer community platform and a very strategic program around that. But to Remco's point, right, one of the things that I did at an early stage startup, we started a Slack channel. Every time a new customer came on board, we added them to the Slack channel, and that became our first community, right? Great. Because that's where they were engaging, having conversations, working with our team. And so it could be as small as that, but there's so many different programs that we do that are part of a community, right? Maybe it's your webinar series and how you're engaging with your customers through that, like these types of things. Office hours, right? Those are all little things that are community elements. And so I love Remco's point, right? Like start today, start day one. There is no right or wrong time to start, but do what you can support is what I would recommend. Do not take on things that you cannot support and manage. Learn from me.
Yeah, I always say to our customers, and it's a very annoying point because it's not really actionable, but I think it's still true. Whether you have a community program or you want one or not, you already have a community, because these are the people that are paying you, that have chosen to use your software, for example, from a B2B perspective, and they already are a community. The only choice that you have is, are you going to actually do something with it? Are you going to get the value that's
really interesting point? Yeah.
Or are you not? But you have it already. These people, they are there. They're ready to be connected. They're probably connecting to each other behind your back already, just trying to figure out how to deal with you or your latest message or your newest invention. So it's not like it's a choice to start building a community. You have one. The choice is then, what does it look like? Do you eventually need a platform? Who's going to do it? But it's there anyway.
So it's actually, it's just such a great point, isn't it? It's very profound. We can go about like being all pretentious and saying, I'm going to create a customer community. But to your point, actually, no, what you're doing is you're creating a platform for your customers to use, but they are the community.
Yeah.
You might be creating some tools for them to use. Really. And it's not your community then, is it? Which is another interesting point.
Exactly.
It's its own community. I think that's quite a profound point too. Yeah.
We can even get more philosophic about it and then just say, we're not creating anything at all. That's also why I started with us as humans. Like, this is a human tendency. We will band together with people that are either our family or that we've grown to really like, or that we know have similar interests. We're going to do this anyway. So whatever we do as a company, we're not actually influencing that part. Well, that's the human nature. We're going to do that.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So what we're talking about is customer community activities rather than customer community itself, in a sense. I get that. But okay, so then coming back to the point that to the question then, and I think to your point, I totally agree with you, and I'm sure you could even say, well, look, if you send everybody a season's greetings card in December, you're doing customer community stuff, but particularly where we're trying to get our customers talking to each other. I think one of the things that holds us back a little bit is content. Do I have enough content? Is it interesting enough? Is it the right quality? And how do I continue to make more of it and keep it useful and interesting and relevant to customers? And I think that this could be perceived as being a very onerous task. You were mentioning about you don't necessarily have to have someone full time, Christy, but I think ultimately, depending on scale, ultimately this content's got to come from somewhere. Ultimately, we want it to come from our customers, but will they do that first? Do we need to? How much seeding is going to be needed? How do we encourage the behaviors that we want, and how do we encourage content to be developed? Any thoughts around that side of it?
I'll give my 2 cents. For us, everyone is a content developer at Client Success. If you're a support agent and you've answered a ticket, you have an answer there that could be applicable to more people. That is content. If you are a CSM, you've created a Loom video for a customer. That is content, right? Every single person in marketing, well, you're the content kings, but everyone is creating content. I think it's how you package it up and disseminate it, right? And content is king. It has been, it always will be. So everyone needs to be focusing on content. You don't need a community plan or strategy to be thinking about that. Your knowledge base is content, right? Your conversations with your customers is content, right? Use what you already have and just package it up and make sure that you're feeding it in. Your customers, and for them, that's a great way to start thinking about seeding it. Now, of course, if you want to put together a whole content plan and build out themes and content and have, different long form, short form video and all these things, that's cool. Great. I wish that I can get there one day. But if you can't, all these other ways that you're already creating content are completely viable and really probably super valuable.
Yeah, agreed.
And is it actually hard to get someone as a third? Because I could see how you could say, well, let's throw some money at this. Okay, let's get a third party to create.
I just hired ChatGPT.
Right, but yeah,
that's the content king right there.
Okay, or anyway, like a third party organization that specializes in this sort of stuff. But I'm wondering whether that again, let's lead you down this road that takes you sort of maybe further away from what your customers really want, rather than gets you closer to them. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I wouldn't throw money at it or get a third party in, because I don't think they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to figure out how to engage your community, your customers, and what makes them tick. I think you need to do that yourself. So you can obviously hire someone and pay them, but I wouldn't go to a third party per se. I think content's always a difficult thing. There's a lot of people that, for example, then tell their marketing team to stop writing blog posts on the blog, but actually start publishing them in the community, for example. Like, I think you need to figure out what your users want from your community, and then you need to start creating content around that. It's probably not, they probably don't want to read another thought leadership article. They probably want to learn something, or, for example, get inspired by what other customers are doing. I do think that there are different types of content that will work better in a community than will work in something else. And I think this is also where we need to broaden the definition of community a little bit. So to Christy's point as well, content is also all of your help content, etc. But content, for example, is also the events that you're hosting. I think we have a lot of customers, but also ourselves. We do a ton of events each year. It's insane, to be honest, when I look at the quantity. But we also leverage community to make sure that people are hyped up, signed up, and basically ready for the event. But we also continue the conversations in the community after, make sure that there are different perspectives, sometimes have speakers, for example, that then come back to the community, do an AMA, like all those kinds of things. You can get really creative about this, and you can get really creative about content. I think you need to have the perspective that you're nurturing this nice, I don't know, bad way of saying it, but you're nurturing this grading, like, I don't know, it's almost like a snow globe. You're nurturing this very engaged platform, a group of people, and you need to make sure that you're doing whatever you can to keep them engaged and keep them interested, and also keep them having fun. For example, we had a customer that built an escape room on top of their community, just for the fun of it. So they literally
like a virtual escape room.
Yeah, so they literally created a route like with just like a click route through the community where you had to find secrets and old posts and those kinds of things that basically defined the history of that community. And then they would time how long people took to do it.
Right.
So you'd get forms and passwords and those kinds of things. It actually only took them like 3 hours to build. I was kind of amazed by that.
I would like to learn more about that.
It was
Sounds really cool, doesn't it?
That's so cool.
Yeah, and all they did it for was to make sure that the people that had invested so much time in that community and their super users and all of the people that had been advising others, they just had a moment of fun and to thank them for it.
Right.
That too is content, and even if it's not leading to any business result or anything else.
But it is building community as well, of course, isn't it? So and sharing values and sharing the good times. So look, we've only got a few more minutes, so let me just try as best I can just to summarize what's been said here, which I think goes along the lines of don't overthink, get going, start small and grow it. Learn from your customers what works, what they want, what they don't want, what they need, and get them involved as early on as possible to help you actually with growing your community. And most important, think carefully about how you're going to measure it. And you mentioned vanity metrics. If you invite 20,000 people to your community, then you've got a 20,000 strong community. Well done. But if none of them actually ever log in, so what? So you need to think about what actually do you want out of your community and choose key performance indicators that actually relate to what you want out of it. So there's my very brief summary. We'll leave it at that. We've got 4 minutes, which means you've got 2 minutes each on the final topic, which is how will customer communities develop and evolve over the next 1 to 2 years? So Christy, do you want to kick off on that one?
Sure. I'm going to take I wrote two, I had 2 points. I'm going to take the second one here. When it comes to community, like again, the formal program platform, like just strategy around it, I honestly think that we're going to see a big shift to customer success owning community. I think there has been probably a lot more marketing teams or support teams or other functions in the business that may have originally owned and driven community as a force in the business. I think that there is going to be a shift behind customer success being the driving force of community because they're going to need it to scale. Right. We have seen so much from this economy. I'm in the States. I don't know what everyone's seeing around where they are, but for us, it has not been kind. Sales is down. A lot of people aren't hiring. People have contracted their teams. I will not say do less with more or more with less, because I hate that slogan. But you got to do something different with what you have. That's what I prefer to say. And I think community is a great resource to do something different with what you have. So that's my forecast and prediction there. I think we're going to see a big shift in customer success going to be a primary driver of community.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christy. Remco.
Awesome. Yeah. So then I had 3 things, but I'm let me then take the one that's a little bit contrary to what you just said to make it fun. So I think historically, especially in B2B SaaS, most communities have been set up for self-service. So answering questions, peer-to-peer support, those kinds of things. I actually think in a couple of years, that use case is going to be less of a community use case because of AI and all those kinds of technologies that are eventually going to disrupt this. It's going to be easier to ask a robot than to ask someone else on the community. So there's going to be a larger emphasis on companies to actually make sure that what they have to offer to their community, whether it's content or anything else, it will need to be inspirational. It will need to be educational. It will need to be coming from their customers and be more customer driven so that basically your users can do something with it that a robot can no longer tell them. So I think there's actually going to be a shift to more teams having to be much more involved with community, including, for example, the CMO org and marketing in that case. Because it's going to be hard to basically keep inspiring your customers and keep something going from the original use cases, I would say. So definitely customer success will keep on growing. But I don't know. I think other departments are going to come in hard.
I don't think that I disagree with that. I don't think it was what I was saying. I think ownership. So right now, a lot of companies don't have the buy-in yet for community. And with so many competing priorities and objectives from other functions, sometimes nobody wants to be the one that says we need community. I think you're going to start to hear the voice of customer success being the driver of saying this is a requirement for us to do what we need to do in support of our customers. So like I said, everyone in my company uses our community, all functions where it's very collaborative. It's just I was, from a customer experience standpoint, the driver of saying this needs to happen and it needs to happen now.
And Remco, I'm imagining the position that you're in. Obviously, you're involved with providing community platform software, and that you have some great research and some fantastic evidence that you can share with those who are perhaps looking to build a business case. Maybe they should get a hold of you and talk to you about it.
100%.
All right, great. So look, it is exactly on the hour. I want to thank my two wonderful guests, Christian and Remco. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You do this, you don't get paid for doing it. You do it out of love.
We don't?
No, not this time.
Wait.
No, that was just to entice you here. Really, really appreciate it. It again, talk about giving back to the community, and here the both of you are. Really great. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you for everyone who's attended, and particularly for all the great questions and comments and observations. Really enjoyed that as well, and look forward to the next session. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I've learned loads, and again, thank you all very much indeed. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.